Welcome to Pop Culture Geekery, where we're going to discuss all matter of pop culture goodness. I'm Joe Solis, and I'll be the host of the show most days. Sometimes I will bring in other people like my wife or friends who are either in some of the industries that we're going to talk about or just lifelong friends who share the same love for this culture that we're going to be talking about. So I wanted to start off a little bit by telling you why we wanted to start the show. So pop culture is just something that, I personally have grown up with even way before it was given the name pop culture. So it was just something that as life progressed and the things that I've experienced, it's just always been there and always been something that I've loved. And I've covered so many different aspects of it that I really feel like I have just a knowledge of a little bit of everything. And so as things come out, I really just love talking to people about it, discussing it. I love seeing people discover some of these things for the first time, especially if it's things that I grew up with and I know that have been around for years from my perspective, but from somebody else, it could be something they just picked up yesterday. So I wanted to share a little bit about myself. So I'm a child of the 80s. I'm a teenager of the 90s. And I'm an adult of the 21st century. So growing up, some of the things that I first encountered were like the Super Friends cartoon, which, is basically the Justice League. Lou Ferrigno as the Incredible Hulk on TV. I grew up with Christopher Reeve as Superman. And that's around the time that my love of movies began as well. I'm a really big movie buff. I love watching movies, me and my wife. That's one of our routines is to check out all the new movies. And that was actually kind of partially the inspiration for this show. But my love of movies began with, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, basically any 80s movies that you can think of that's, whether they're action, adventure, fantasy, comedy, I've probably seen them at least once. I have survived all incarnations of Batman, from Michael Keaton all the way to Ben Affleck. Another thing I grew up with was 80s cartoons. I'm sure a lot of people now, talk about the 80s cartoons and how they're, basically just 30-minute long toy commercials. But, for us, even though we learned later in life that that's what they were, I know for me personally, they still hold a fondness. Whether it be g.i.joe, Transformers, the real Ghostbusters, He-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, you name it. I watched it and probably had, plenty of the toys. And then on into the 90s when things like Batman the Animated Series started, X-Men the Animated Series, you had Nicktoons coming out, you had Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life, Doug, Rugrats. It was just such a good time for animation and new shows coming out. Around that time too is when I started collecting comic books. At the time I was just trying everything. Obviously, as you see, one of my favorites is Batman, so that he was one of my ins into the comic book world. I've always really loved Superman, so I would always read about him. Really came to love the X-Men at the time, which was Jim Lee's X-Men that they debuted at the time. Also, Image Comics started at that time, so I followed a lot of their stuff. Tried Dark Horse, followed Valiant. It was just such a great time to get into the hobby, and I have pretty much followed it ever since. During my college years, and a little bit after is when some of the big franchises came later, like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the Fox X-Men movies. And then at the time, there were Marvel and DC movies, but this was way before that they started their shared universe. At this time, too, is when I first discovered conventions, both Comic-Cons and anime conventions, which nowadays we tend to lean more towards anime, me and my wife, but I'm still curious about some of the Comic-Cons in the area. But we eventually took, our love for all this stuff one step further In 2014, my wife and I started our company, which is Child's Play Games and Geekery. We had it for a couple of years as a retail store selling board games and card games and comic books, but it was just conventions and events. It wasn't until 2016 that we actually opened our first brick and mortar store, and we kept that for about a year. And then in 2017, we actually were able to move to a bigger location, and that was all here in New Braunfels, Texas. But then unfortunately after that, I did run into some health issues. We were both doing our day jobs and the store, and so my body was just giving out. But thankfully recovered from that, but unfortunately it did lead to the tough decision for us to sell the store in 2018. We did keep the company though, so we converted Child's Play into a creative studio basically. We still do some geeky events, but our main focus is creation. One of the things my wife is working on now is her own card game. We have a mascot that was always associated with the store. We hope to release a comic book about her one day. And even things like this YouTube show, which you're watching now, are all created under the Child's Play banner. Overall, like I said, just wanted to kind of give you an idea of what our show is going to be like. Bottom line is we just want to do something that's kind of informative and kind of fun, and we'll kind of share things with people that maybe they wouldn't see otherwise. So for now, this is going to be where the YouTube channel is. Soon we're going to be launching the website, which is going to be www.popculturegeekery.com, and that'll either lead directly here to the channel or it'll lead to a website. That's still in the planning stages, and that's the part that we do appreciate your patience. Everything has its beginnings, so as we build the channel more and get better at video editing and adding things to our videos, we just appreciate any support. Of course, subscribing is one of the lifelines of YouTube, so we do ask that you subscribe to the channel, and that way as we post things, you'll get notifications. So we hope that you'll be following us and that you'll come along this journey with us and see what kind of pop culture goodness we can all share together. Thanks, guys.